Hi folks, Jason here. I just wanted to do a short-ish video on looking at human anatomy. It's not an area that we've covered a lot, and I wanted to just have a kind of little dive into it and about how you should really be approaching your drawing, particularly, doing human figures, but also moving on to like, animal anatomy and things like that. So the first thing I would say straight off the bat is you need to be getting reference, plenty of reference. Pinterest is really good for this. If you go onto Pinterest here and look at, say, for example, the myriad of just different examples of human anatomy that you can find. Of course, there's the little diagram there that I've got uploaded and other things as well, but also be drawing from life. So have a look at male, female figures and just start drawing from them. Try and draw from life directly. So that could be family, friends, things like that. Drawing a family pet, things like that. Um, Really, really useful to do, and it will improve your drawing, not just of figures, but of objects in general, like tenfold. So I highly, highly recommend it. Anyway, let's just go and have a quick look and see what I've got here on my page. So if I just kind of go over here, so this is what we're going to be covering in this little session is a grid. This is like a standard thing to kind of do for drawing figures, which I'll dip into in a minute. We've got a little kind of model there. You can actually pick these up online. I think they're quite expensive, but they're not too expensive. They're not just a few quid, but really good for things like skin and muscles and things like that. And it's got some images that I took from Pinterest as well. Humans in different poses. These are all really good things to kind of like draw, in your sketchbook, things like that. Now, as a general rule with human beings, with a male is typically 8 heads high. So I'm just going to zoom in there a little bit and go in. So you can see there, basically the head will go into the body 8 heads. And I'm working from memory now. I think the male body is 2.5 heads wide. When it comes to the female body, again, 8 heads, but I think it's 2 heads wide. And obviously, big differences with the anatomy, certainly around the hip area, because obviously women's hips are meant to be for childbearing. So you kind of get a lot of a wider hip, whereas men's hips are generally narrower. And obviously things like, the thighs, the arms, obviously the breast, things like that. So we're going to have a go at doing some drawing together, and you can follow along, or you could just watch me doing some drawing. But it's always good to kind of use stuff like this as a reference to kind of draw from it. Just move this over to one side here, grab hold of that, move that over to there, like so. Right, so let's get to it. So again, when you're drawing, particularly if you're drawing in Photoshop, you want to have your brush with, so if you have a look here, I've got some effects going on there. As a general rule, I'll use natural brushes. Now, I'm not sure if it's actually showing on here. If you go into Photoshop and go to this little cog symbol here, go to legacy brushes, it'll bring it up. So you basically scroll down when you kind of right click and scroll down, you'll see that it's got legacy brushes. I prefer these. For some reason, Photoshop changed it all, or Adobe changed it all a couple of years ago. So you can only use particular brushes with, different tools. This I quite like because you can actually use these with any whether it's a smudge tool or any of the other things that are on there. And it's natural brushes that I tend to use, and it's this one here. And then if you don't see these symbols here, you'll need to go to Window and go to Brush Settings and click on that, or F5. If you click on that, You'll see there, the only two things we're really going to be bothered about is shape dynamics and scattering. So I'm going to click on shape dynamics, click on scattering. You see nothing's changing at the moment. If I go to click on the word shape dynamics, where it says control, go to off, and then where it says pen pressure, click on that, and you'll see now it's tapered. So if I just go on here now, you'll see it's tapered, but it's not really sort of scattered. So I'm going to click on scattering, do the same thing there, pen pressure, but with scattering, what I'm going to do, and just look at the little icon down there. If you move the slide back and forth, you can see it kind of changes it to kind of stipple. Now, I quite like this because it has a kind of like pencil type effect. You don't want your brush at 100%. I see students doing this a lot where they've got things. Oh, got an email. You've got students who kind of like use things at 100%. It doesn't look too kind of natural. Whereas if you kind of take the opacity down, you'd say something like 60, you can actually start even probably a little bit less than that. What's that? About 18, even something like 18, maybe up a little bit from there. Play around with it because you need to be sort of sketching on top of what you're going to be doing. But that's looking all right for now. I'm going to just zoom in a little bit there. Bring that up to say there. So again, what you can do is you could do one of two ways. You can start, like say, if you're following this, you could start by maybe sketching in, say, an oval shape, and then using geometric shapes for the rest of the body. So looking at creating, say, like a square for the neck, move that along. If you hold down Shift and click, you can actually draw straight lines as well, which is very useful. Not so much for stuff like this, but certainly for horizontal and vertical lines. It's very, very useful. So you can go this route where you're basically creating the body that way. That's one way of doing it. Another way to say, look at the female one, is you can go in, so look at basically the negative space. And that can be quite a useful way of doing it as well. So instead of actually drawing the oval shape, what you can do is look at what's missing. So if I just increase that temporarily, take the size of the brush down, I can look at that then and kind of go, right, so that is there, like so, and that's the rest of the square. So if I just add a color to this, say something like red or something like that, you'll see there the negative space. Just zoom in. The negative space is here. And then if I just go and select another color, say green, the positive space is here. So you can actually break things down into shapes that way as well. And that can be quite a useful way of doing it. So for example, if I were to then apply that, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. If I were to, just see the opacity is down on that a little bit as well. I'm just going to take that up to there. That's better. If I go to my brush tool, then if I go to my brush tool and go, right, okay, so that's where the positive space is. I can see that there. You can work that way and do it that way. So just sort of draw it in that kind of fashion. You know that it's taken up that section of the square. And then you can have a look at maybe even to all do is use the eyedropper tool on that, the brush. And then for the rest of the negative space, you can draw that. Now after that, you could just take the opacity down a little bit, create another layer, and then using a, say, black color, then you could basically draw take the size of the opacity down, and then draw over the top of that. It's whatever works really at the end of the day. And then you've got, other details that you can start putting in there. So it's entirely up to you how you approach this. For the purposes of today, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick with how I was doing this, which is essentially starting to kind of draw in geometric shapes. I'll just take the opacity down. And effectively what I'm going to do is use geometric shapes to build the character up. And I highly recommend you take this approach with absolutely everything that you do drawing-wise, is use geometric shapes. So for example, I've got like essentially a rectangle with sloped corners, like there. But again, just very, very loose. For the shoulders there, you could probably go with something like an oval. And we've got, so looking at the sort of rib area here, again, that's just like another sort of tapered square, really. Something like that. And I'm also just looking at these parts here as well. So, looking back and forth. You should really be having 50% observation, 50% drawing when you're doing stuff like this. Always be looking at what you're drawing. Looking back and forth, back and forth. Again, for this bicep area, I'll probably use another oval. Say something like that. And that's probably going to come a little bit further down, all the way down to there. Something like that. And then for the hip area here, again, this is looking more like a square that's angled. So something like that. The groin area there, you're looking at maybe an oval, like so. And then maybe a sort of triangular shape there, like that. So again, just all geometric shapes. The leg, same thing again. We're looking at more squares. So I'm not, resist the temptation to start trying to put organic shapes in there. Just keep it really basic for now. It'd be the same thing if you were doing like 3D modeling. Just keep everything as a basic shape, and then you can kind of add the detail into it. So for the kneecaps here, just adding some ovals, and then over here we've got more of a square shape with an angle, another square shape with an angle, same on the other side. Something like that. Then let's see about this. We've got that there. That's that there. So we'll go 1, 2, 3. So that goes to the arm. That's 3. 4 should be the wrist. So that's again a kind of triangular part, squared. Same thing on the other side as well. So almost like a diamond shape, something like that. The hand, that could just be an oval for now. We've got that there. That's all correct there. Well, that's where I've gone wrong. I'm going to take that out and then put that a little bit further down. So that actually comes down a little bit more. So it's talking and drawing at the same time. So again, we've got that there. That will come down to there, like so. Then we've got that there with the bottom part of the leg. And then with the final part, again, it comes down as a sort of tapered kind of square. And the feet really are more like kind of like pyramids. Not quite pyramids, but triangular squares. So you should end up with something that kind of looks like that. And that would be the first start. So you'd have that as the basics. And where you go from there, obviously you need to be looking at reference, but where you go from there is you'd start to then start working into it, right? So we could potentially take the opacity down on that, just so it's not so strong. Create another layer. So, very good. Layer, new layer, or Shift Control and N. Or you can do the little sort of symbol. You can't sort of see it on my screen, but you can do the little symbol down at the bottom. And then we can start having a look at drawing on the top. So I'm going to just zoom in a little bit. And so, okay, so maybe start putting like an eye line in there. Again, I'm just holding down Shift to get these straight lines. And then maybe holding down Shift and making that a bit more narrow, round it off at the top. You can spend a little bit of time. Sometimes I find if you can just get one, maybe even just like a bit more detail than you would do ordinarily with the head, it kind of helps set the tone for the rest of the drawing. So I'm just going in like so. Again, I'm going to sort of put the cheekbones in there. But the ears won't go above where the eyebrows are, so we'll put the ears there like so. With the neck coming down from the ears, like so. And then I'll probably bring that down to say there. And again, all I'm doing here is just really just smoothing out these geometric shapes. Also looking at things like the clavicle, looking at the kind of like the collarbones, things like that. We've got here, they've got the muscles in the neck, little dip in the neck, underneath the chin, the chest. Again, we're going to add like a sort of curve to that there. Like so. Same on the other side there. Then we've got the rib cage here. So you see like a little bit of a kind of like an indication of the rib cage there. And then you kind of got essentially we're coming to the waist now. So we've got the waist and how that starts to kind of curve. So you can see there, it's kind of where the hips are, the hip bones, which then comes down to like the navel area here. So you kind of got stomach there. So this is where you can have like the six pack. And then below there, you've got like the belly button. And then you kind of got the groin area, which is there. Something like that. So you've kind of got then, so what you end up with is you've had your geometric shapes, and what we're doing now is we're kind of working over the top. And again, looking at reference. So you can look at this drawing, of course. I'm working partly from memory, but if you can get like a figure, stood in the kind of, instead of like in a pose, just in a front pose, looking forward, that would be more helpful for you at this stage anyway. Then we're looking at the arm. So again, we kind of got this muscle groups kind of going on here. That part of the arm, you see, you got the armpit kind of going in there, but this kind of comes round, and then you've kind of got the forearm, which comes down there. Say something like that, and then you kind of got the bend of the arm there and things like that. Same on the other side as well. So again, just mirroring the other side there. And then a bit on the forearm there, all the way down to the wrists. And then working down to the legs again, just trying to round these off. So you kind of got the thighs going all the way down to the kneecaps there, like so. Same on the other side as well. Something like that. And then we've kind of got the calves, the shins. And then we've got a bit of a sort of gap there. So it doesn't go straight all the way down. It kind of goes in. You can see there underneath, it kind of dips in. Something like that. And then kind of comes out. So it kind of goes out, in, then out like an S shape, and then back in again. Same on the other side as well. Something like that. And then the feet, again, feet are notoriously difficult to do, which increase the strength of that a little bit. But when you're drawing sort of toes head on, what you're doing really is just creating an impression. You don't want to start putting details in, things like that. You're just creating an impression. Like maybe just do something like that with the top toes. Then the rest of them are like almost like just curves, like backward C's. And then a little bit of a bump on top there, and then down. Same thing with that. So here you've basically got now the outline. I'm just going to do the hand. I'll probably just do both sets of hands, just like the one on the left there. So again, just kind of working with the thumb. Again, this is more of an impression, so we're not really going in for too much detail. Again, take that to there. And maybe you could add just a shadow of a finger there, and then maybe like, so it's something like that. You're not going to see all the fingers because you're seeing directly, that's the line of sight. So you'd apply the same thing to the other side as well. Again, if you want to sort of draw lines over there, you can do with the using the shift key. And let's just do that again. bringing that round to say around about there. And again, you could sort of intimate like the fingers kind of behind there, something like that. And again, you can spend some time on this, more time than I'm spending at the moment. So you effectively got like the form there. So where do you go from there? Well, then you could create another layer. So you could either go, you can't see it at the bottom because it's been obscured at the moment, but you go to layer, new, and layer, or shift, control, and N. And then this is where you'd kind of add some shading. So again, you could even take this down a little bit, just so it's not so prominent. We've kind of got the general gist there. And then you can think, okay, so I'm going to assume that there's like a light source coming from this area here, or like a general light, maybe not a harsh light. And then what you can do is a bit like, say, when you draw, like, say, a sphere. I'll just do this as an example. And you have like it's darker on one side. If I choose my smudge tool there, you can kind of blend that a little bit like so. And basically give the illusion of sort of 3D. I'll just go into the light brush there, maybe increase the opacity a little bit. And a bit of reflection underneath, maybe a bit of the side. Again, just using the smudge tool. Go back to the other tool there. So you generally get the idea. So it's applying this, well, similar principles to this. So when it comes to this, you want to be treating the head like it is a sphere. So if the light's coming from this angle, then there's going to be a shadow kind of on the nose and just on the underneath there, say perhaps. A little bit in that, I think it's called the philtrum or something, isn't it? Basically, it's going to give a bit more kind of contrast. This is where you can kind of really go to town with things like values and stuff with when it comes to kind of drawing is instead of like going into color, you can just concentrate on getting the values in, the light and the dark. Say something like that. The neck, of course, that bit's going to be probably under shade, as well as the collarbone, because the light's kind of coming that direction. And of course, light bounces around as well, so it's not like it should be too stark. Let's say something like that. May even have a, excuse me, may even have a little bit of shadow there. Maybe a bit just around there, around the chin. And just a slight bit maybe just underneath the eye there. But again, the face isn't flat. It's got lots of curves and things like that. So you'll end up with, yeah, if you sort of squint your eyes at that, you'll sort of see there's some contrast. So I might just take that a wee bit to there. And again, everything's just really an impression. I'm not really, you could maybe intimate some nostrils and things like that, but And when it comes to things like, you could, like I did with the sphere, you could add some highlights in if it helps. I wouldn't get too bogged down, at present, but you can do things like that, where it just kind of helps to kind of bring out the shape and just add a little bit more contrast, that kind of difference between the kind of the dark and the light. And then maybe a bit on that cheek there. Have a bit more on the forehead, perhaps. Sometimes it can help just to kind of perhaps add a bit more detail than you would do ordinarily, just so you can kind of get to grips with the overall sort of tone, as it were, of what you're trying to draw. But I think that's kind of on its way. And then I'm going to flip back to the black now, and then you're basically working your way along. So you're then kind of going, right, okay. So again, you need to be working from reference, but kind of going, right. So if that's the case, then I'm going to, add some kind of shadow here. We've got the chest area here. Can add a bit of shadow there. And again, a little bit under the collarbone. Again, you've got this bone right underneath the skin, which is kind of pushing it up. But then with the light, it's going to kind of like, it's almost like you've got like what is it? It's like a cylinder or something underneath. Like so. And if you wanted to kind of add like a highlight, you could do a little bit there, that kind of thing. Then go back to the black. And then, so again, there's a good chance that this part of the arm, as opposed to this other side, is going to be darker. So it's going to be perhaps something like that. But it's kind of depending on the angle of the light, it's not going to be catching too much light. Ditto with this. Probably quite a bit of it under shade, perhaps. This is where it's good to kind of look at all the old masters' works, all the artists from times before who did a lot of this kind of stuff, looking at human studies. And they were masters for a reason, because they just studied and they drew and they drew and they studied light, they studied forms, studied how light affected, or how it was sort of represented on objects and things like that. So again, I'm just going to put a little bit there. So this bit's not going to be as dark because the light's coming from that area there. So I'm just going to intimate. So again, a bit like with the sphere, it's going to kind of intimate that a little bit. What's going on? Then again, just kind of add a bit of shading there. That's going to be a bit more shading on there, but depending on the size of the chest, it may be that it just obscures as the light kind of comes down. It's going to obscure that from light a little bit. And then the same thing with this. So again, using those sort of same principles, like the belly is going to be sort of rounded, right? So you're going to add a bit more shading, say, to there. like so. Maybe just soften that a little bit there, a little bit underneath here. Switch things around and put a bit of white on there. Again, just kind of intimating you don't want to go too far with this. Just so again, we're getting nice kind of contrast there. You can see there with the shoulder. So just again, squint your eyes at this video, and you can see there you're starting to kind of get an impression that there's this form is being. We've put all the kind of groundwork in with the lines and things like that, but the form's starting to kind of be brought out with the um, with the light and how it's affecting it. So again, okay, and switch things around again with the black. Might be under a bit of shade there. Now this is entirely possible. You see that this arm could indeed even be bent a little bit, or at the elbow at least, which would obscure it a little bit more. This is where you kind of like you could potentially use your imagination. So it's kind of being picked up now. So if you can kind of like maybe like something like that, where you kind of got the light. So the light's kind of going there and it's just kind of catching part of the arm. Something like that. Again, you probably get a bit of foreshortening going on, so it might be like slightly higher up than that. But anyway, we'll just leave it as is for now. Switch that back. Again, something like that. Same thing with the leg. Again, you kind of got that groin area. Rotating on the arm. Now, if you were looking to do like a full render, so really go to town on this, you're looking at more than where we're clocking in at the moment. We're coming up to around about 40 minutes. You could easily be spending a lot more time than that if you want to kind of put more detail in. For the purposes of this little demo, I'm just going to keep it the basics, more of an impression. Again, kind of maybe that. We could add some highlights in there, maybe. So I'm kind of like just going back. You might find this anyway. You kind of just going back and forth, maybe just having a look at certain parts of it as you go along. bit there, maybe a bit on the thigh. The highlights help to kind of give it a bit more of a dimensionality about it. You know, it's got a bit more rounded, like it's an actual object. Again, I might just that. I don't worry too much about the hands. I'm just going to sort of concentrate on the body, really. And again, if you sort of squint your eyes, you can kind of see that form kind of coming through. And it might just dampen that down a wee bit around that area. Uh, Maybe for the rest of the legs, I'm going to maybe just darken this down quite a bit more. With a highlight to the knee, maybe, just to kind of pick that out, like so. Again, it's always good. This is why you see artists kind of squinting their eyes. It's always good just kind of squint your eyes and see if the values are working, if it gives like an impression. That doesn't seem to be doing too badly at the moment. Again, I might be inclined just to kind of add a bit more of a highlight to that. Maybe a bit more here. Because if this is going to be catching most of the light as opposed to this, I mean, this may catch a little bit, but this is kind of getting the brunt. And it stands to reason it's going to be lighter on this side. Again, with a little bit of sort of shading as well kind of going on. So something like that. Again, just sort of squinting the eyes, having a look. And that's pretty much it really. So, you know, again, you sort of really go to town with some of the, you know, other details. Like I say, once you've kind of done this stage, you know, like say with the hands, where, you know, you've kind of got, and the rest of the body, you know, where you've kind of got maybe, depending on where the hands are sort of situated, you've got the basics. And then from here, you know, once you kind of done something like this, you can then begin to really sort of work into it. And again, depending on the level of detail you want to go into, you've gone from very sort of, you know, basic shapes there, geometric shapes. You put some like more organic lines in with some shading. And then where you'd go from here is you could, if I just say duplicate that layer, you could then take this. So these are like the levels of that you would go to, like if you was creating a painting. H. And that'd be, okay, so I've got that established now, and now I can actually start thinking about, right, well, and again, you need reference as well. Then you can kind of go, right, okay, so now I've kind of got that established. I can maybe even start thinking about putting some details in, with the eyes, for example. And things like the nose as well, and things like that. So you're kind of working your way, basically going into more and more detail as you go into this. So again, I'm not going to like continue much longer with this, but you could start to. I'd always say as well, just still continue to sort of take an impressionistic stance with it, as opposed to kind of going with like hard edges and things like that. At least for now, when you're trying to understand details, anatomy and things like that. Get a little bit pixelated here because it's quite. If you kind of zoom out, this is like 300 pixels, but obviously we're zooming in to a detail there, so it's going to start getting sort of pixelated. It's like an A4 sheet basically at 300 pixels. Might just take the scatter off that for now, and then some details there like that. So with a bit of a highlight. That. And and then just basically continue working into it. So hopefully you found this video useful. It just takes time if you're relatively new to kind of like doing drawing, or if you've been drawing for a while, um, but you kind of like you perhaps haven't had a lot of the kind of fundamentals. Then I would say always be drawing from life. Drawing from imagination's good, and drawing some of the like favorite characters, perhaps from like cartoons or whatever. That's all right. But I think you'd really benefit from drawing from life, drawing objects, drawing people. Always be carrying a sketchbook with you, and drawing sort of figures and things like that. Objects, anything. It could literally be anything. And you will see you start to kind of make a real jump with your drawing as sort of time goes on. So anyway, hopefully you found that useful. And again, if you've got any questions about your drawing or about anything kind of related to creating characters, be sure to get in touch. But until then, thanks for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye for now.